Granddaughter of Yogi Berra, Lindsay Berra, joins us here on NBC Sports California. It Ain't Over is the documentary, which is now streaming on Netflix, on Apple, as well as Amazon. And Lindsay, you worked on this documentary. I know, obviously, it's very personal to you, but why did it need to get out there? Why do people need to see this?
Everybody thinks that it was my righteous indignation when you see the the trailer on YouTube after the 2015 All-Star game, when my grandfather was left off the list of the greatest living MLB players by allegedly a fan vote. I don't really know who actually votes, but it was Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Johnny Bench, and Sandy Koufax. And I was sitting right next to my grandfather when this happened, watching the All-Star game. And I looked at him and I said, "Are you dead?" And he said, "Not yet." And I just thought he deserved to be out on the field alongside those guys. I didn't think anyone needed to be knocked off the list. I just thought there should have been 5 greatest living players. And I think that what happened in the long run was that my grandfather had such an oversized personality, and he became known for all the Yogiisms, and the personality kind of overshadowed how great a baseball player he was on the field. And I wanted people to remember that.
Billy Crystal, obviously big Yankees fan, a famous actor as well, had the quote in the trailer who says he, your grandpa, Yogi, was the most overlooked superstar in the history of baseball. And I think as soon as he said that, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Of course, when I think of Yankees, maybe Roger Maris, Mickey Mantle, Babe Ruth, Yogi Berra, the accolades are absolutely ridiculous if you go back and take the time to look him up. Obviously, I'm not old enough to remember watching him play. So it is, it's twofold, right? Like it's the person and it's the performance that are both undershadowed somehow. How did that happen?
I mean, I think he was a super humble guy to begin with, so some of it might have actually even been his fault. But he was on a team that with Joe DiMaggio and Mickey Mantle and these people who were, great American superstars, right? And you forget that Grandpa leads the team in RBIs 7 years in a row on teams that include Joe DiMaggio and Mickey Mantle. Grandpa was kind of the funny-looking little guy who said funny things, but people forget, what a great, tremendous clutch hitter he was. He won 10 World Series, which will never, ever happen again. And there's so many other stats that are just incredible. One of my favorites is that there's only 2 players in the history of Major League Baseball with more than 350 home runs and fewer than 500 strikeouts, and it's Joe DiMaggio and my grandpa Yogi. And people don't often put him in the same breath with Joe DiMaggio. So I think he was overlooked by a lot of his own teammates at that time. And I think he just didn't go around like tooting his own horn very often. So other people, I got to do it for him.
Yeah, well, I'll do it too here. My favorite one that I did some research on was he played 19 seasons, all the years with the Yankees, and then finishing off the very last bit with the Mets. He was an all-star every single season from age 23 to 37. That's
and
also
some of those years
of.
They had 2 All-Star games, and he played in both of them. I mean, one of the crazy ones, and I physical challenge anyone to do this just once. Yeah. He caught both ends of double headers 119 times in his career. I mean, that is ridiculous. 18 innings in the summer in a wool suit. There was no dry fit back then.
Yeah, they don't make them like they used to in terms of ball player or the jerseys they were wearing. It seems like in terms of the documentary, going back to that, you have some pretty top-tier interviewees. I would imagine that when you were working on the documentary and you were asking people to, give an interview or give their thoughts, you didn't have any challenges landing like pretty much the top people in recent baseball time.
Oh, and also not so recent. It's funny. Some of my main priority was to get the older folks because I wanted as many people as possible who had either played with my grandfather or seen him play. So my number one priority was Vin Scully. I was like, we're doing this immediately. He's 95 years old. I want him in this movie. He was the first interview we did. And then we went after folks like Audrey Garagiola, Bobby Richardson, Hector Lopez. Roger Angel from The New Yorker was 100 years old when we interviewed him. But then obviously we wanted other, more current Yankees. We did have a little problem with the 14-month pandemic shutdown in the middle of our filming. So we had some trouble getting some people. We had wanted Jorge Posada, Reggie Jackson. We just couldn't make it happen with the pandemic. But I'm, really just thrilled with the list of folks that we did end up getting into the film.
Yeah, it's a who's who of people in the baseball world, not just Yankee stars, but across the baseball world. And I'll run this past you too, because I was thinking about this preparing for our chat. You know, major leaguers in this day and age, they're so criticized because they don't have enough personality. And not to single any Angel superstar out, but like Mike Trout is front and center. Great ball player, list of accolades, all that stuff, but they want him to be more marketable, I suppose. And it's kind of weird because here's your grandpa who was a great player and who was marketable, but was, like I said, maybe not seen as the ball player because he was so marketable. It's almost like your grandpa in this day and age would have been the golden boy of baseball.
Oh my God. And people say, there's baseball Twitter is a thing.
Yeah,
and people go on about, how much would Yogi Berra make today? What would Yogi Berra do in the age of social media? I mean, the general consensus on the internet is that he would be unpayable, whatever that means, because he won so much and that's what you're paying for. And I would love to see what he would have done in the age of social media. I mean, he was a quip a second. In my family, you just kind of sat there waiting for him to drop some other, crazy saying that when you looked past what he actually said was actually a real pearl of wisdom. But what I will say about his personality is that he really just was who he was. He never pretended to be somebody else. He wasn't a different person with his family than he was with the public. He treated the president of the United States and the UPS guy exactly the same way. And I think a lot of that perspective comes from people forget he was on Omaha Beach during the D-Day invasion.
Yeah.
And you don't go through a real life or death experience without coming out of it with some life perspective on the other side. And I think he just realized that life was kind of too short to put on airs and to be something you're not.
Yeah, that's another amazing part of his journey. He literally rolled right from military service right into, playing in the big leagues for 18, 19 seasons. You mentioned the social media aspect. If he were on Twitter, let's say, he would have put out there, baseball's 90% mental, the other half is physical. And all the Yogiisms, I literally have the list here and I could run through all of them. But why did he have such a way with words? Did he get a kick out of doing that, out of dropping those one-liners and maybe catching people off guard decades ago?
He had no idea that he was doing it. It was just, he had this very black and white way of seeing the world. Everything was either just, right or wrong, black or white, left or right. There was nothing in the middle, right? He just called it like he saw it. And, as a kid growing up, if you had a problem, you would go to him. He had the most forthright moral compass in the world. And you would go to him with a problem and he would tell you immediately what the thing was that you had to do, usually with some sort of play on words that was pithy, but not intentionally. And you'd be like, oh, darn it. Like, he's totally right. That's exactly what I have to do. And it's not going to be easy because the right thing to do is rarely the easy thing to do. But it just came so naturally to him, and it just came out in the way that he spoke. He just called it like he saw it.
Well, leave it at this. I'm sure your grandpa would have been so proud to see the work that you did in honoring him. And I wonder, now that the documentary's out and people are seeing it, enjoying it, having their realizations, is there something next you feel like you need to do? Or did this satisfy maybe what you were setting out to do?
No, I think it satisfied it. I have a 3-year-old nephew and a 3.5-year-old niece, and I can't wait till they're like 10 years old and can understand what they're seeing. And I want them to watch it and learn who their great grandpa was. And I think that was my goal, was to keep his legacy alive for generations to come. I think there's a lot that can be learned from his life. He's a great baseball player, but he really was just a tremendous human being. And you can learn a lot from the way he treated other people and then just the way he behaved on a day-to-day basis. And that really comes through in this documentary. And I think that's what's important, and that's what we need right now.
Well, it's a pretty big deal because it's on Netflix and Apple and Amazon. It's easy to find. Everybody's got access to it. So go check out It Ain't Over, streaming right now. Lindsay, I appreciate this and learning more about your grandpa, and thank you so much for the time.
Thanks so much for having me, Brody.